Hello, fellow travelers, and today is a wonderfully exciting day for me because it's present day and I received a present in the mail. Now, I bought my own present, so I don't know if that should change it, but I'm certainly excited. So, of course, this is part of our series here at the Creative Cocoon on preserving food, but this is an actual product review and discussion about this particular product. And of course, you saw in the description what it's about. It is about my second pressure canner that I purchased so that I could have two, one as a backup. Now, I want to say that the pressure canner that we're talking about, of course, is the Presto 23 quart, and I absolutely love that pressure canner. I know that my mother had one of those and loved it. Now, I've been to friends' houses who have different brands, and I think they're amazing and wonderful. I just happen to like this one, and there are a few reasons I really like the Presto canner. Number one, I actually went on the hunt to try to get an American canner because I felt that they've been discussed in such a positive way. And I know it's an amazing canner, but it's also about 4 or 5 times the price of one of the Presto canners. And so for me, knowing that the Presto canner will last probably me a lifetime, I think I was okay with spending less money and then having a backup or a few canners. Now, I typically have not, as of yet, dipped my toe into the electric canners or the digital canners or those types of things. I am a stovetop canner, whether I'm in the house or in the outdoor canning station that we have. But typically, like I said, my Presto canner has been a I love it. I can't say anything more. Now, when I am doing water bath canning, which by the way, I don't tend to do a lot anymore because I'm so trusting of the whole pressure canning process. Of course, I still use the would use if the case arise for water bath canning, the wonderful big black pots with the white spots on them. I think they're great for that, and I have a few of those. I use those as my stock pots when I'm making stock, or if I'm mixing different things, as you will see in some of the other videos that we have here for preparation and tutorial for the different things that we can. Now, back to point. So when I arrived home and saw that wonderful product sitting on my porch, I was extremely, extremely excited. One thing I also want to add is as I talk to people in the various communities that I'm part of, one of the things that I hear when I start sharing about food preservation is, oh, I'm very scared about using pressure, anything, or canning. How do you know the food is safe? Or the other one I get a lot of is pressure canning. Don't those things blow up? I've heard nightmare stories, and we've all heard them. They're as popular as the um, Lover's Cove, the man with the hook, myths out there, the urban myths that we hear all the time. That being said, I have to say, I have canned thousands and thousands of jars using my pressure canner and never had an issue. And the pressure canner that I'm about to show you, which my other one is exactly like it. I just got a duplicate because I loved it so much. Has so many safety features that we don't have to worry about what would happen when the pressure builds up and things would blow. And I'll show you during the unboxing all of the different safety features that make that near impossible to happen. I'm not saying it's completely impossible. I'm sure it could happen, but I don't know how it could. How's that? So, without further ado, let's unbox. So, here is our wonderful piece of equipment, which will provide decades, hopefully, of wonderful food and love and caring for people and nourishment. So this is my second Presto 23 quart pressure canner that I've gotten. And I just can't speak highly enough about them. They're absolutely incredible. This is laying on its side. They come like this. Now, um, ours came wrapped. They usually do come wrapped. And before you start ripping off plastic, let me take you through my process, because this box may not seem like a priority, but the one thing that I love is the fact that I always save my box, and when I'm done with my canning session, I go ahead and I repackage everything, and I'm going to show you how I like to repackage everything so it's safe and it will last me for decades. But I save my box, but not only my box. Do you see the plastic wrapping about it? I'm going to tip it up right. Turn it this way, and now it's right up top. This is the top of my box. I'm going to grab some scissors, and I am going to just clip right to the edge, because I want to save on the sides and the bottom of my box that plastic on there. I like that. It's going to protect the box, keep everything nice and tight for storage. And by the way, I do the same thing with my jars. When I get a box of 12 jars, pints or quarts or any size, and it comes wrapped in that plastic, I actually cut the top part of the plastic off, but leave the plastic on the box, because I save my jar boxes to be able to transport my jars over to my pantry and actually set them on the shelf in the boxes. I find that that can keep them safe as well, in case of any unforeseen thing, rather than having them jiggle off through vibration or trucks going by and losing a lot of your food product. Okay, so the top is now off. Let me get the right side here. So the top is now off. There's our side. There is our top. I'm going to go ahead, snip the tape gently. Again, I don't want to rip this guy. I want to keep this box in good shape. I know some of you like to store your equipment just right open on a shelf, but I know for me with canning, I keep this stuff down in our pantry room, and the box is a perfect place. Plus it keeps all of the stuff that's in here safe. Having it out and about loose, that's how things get lost. And there are parts to this that you don't want to lose. So I'm simply going to go ahead, snip that, open, open sesame. Okay, so now this guy is on its side. So I'm going to go ahead, and the first thing I'm going to do is simply tip my box upside down. Ta-da! Get my box out of the way. And let me see which is up. There we go. Now we are back at the top. And we have our bag. Okay, so you see the styrofoam? We have this styrofoam. This styrofoam, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put back in the bottom of my box, because that is going to stay there forever and ever and ever. The other reason I like to keep the box and everything is if I choose to pass my old one on, then I can do so and include the original box. Or if, God forbid, when that day comes and I'm no longer here and this stuff gets passed on to whoever or sold to or given away to a thrift shop, I want to have a complete thing for the next person that gets it, because I know that they're going to be preparing a lot of wonderful food and love for their family. Okay, so now I have this top styrofoam. I have this little guy, which is that protective coating or covering packaging for my, ooh, look at my lid. This is what my old lid looked like. This looks amazing. Love it, love it, love it. Look how shiny and new. That's amazing. Now, when you open this lid, there are different parts of this. What we have here is we have our lid, we have our vent for venting, our steam venting area. This is our little top popper, and that tells us how much pressure. This is like also a little bit of a pressure relief while we're utilizing it. Now, this is where our dial goes. This is a dial canner. This is a dial pressure canner, and I like dials more than I like weighted ones, even though it does come with a weight. And this little black guy here, this is our emergency guy that's going to pop. Like the old days we talked about when people would say, oh, I'm afraid that something would explode. It's because it didn't have a lot of these different safety features. With these, you typically never have to worry. And of course, we have our wonderful handles. Now, the one thing I want you to notice about these handles is they are tight. Now, I brought over our old, not my old, but my oldest, my first pressure canner, and I'm going to show you it needs a little bit of maintenance, and you might have to do some maintenance down the road too, and I'm going to show you, and it's about the handles. So that is the top itself, so that's part of what comes. Now in this styrofoam we also have our pressure gauge, which is a dial pressure gauge. Now I'll tell you this, do you see the bubble wrap? We don't throw that away. Now, I have a housemate that would probably throw this away immediately, and I would dig it right out of the trash because we want to save this. This is also something that's going to keep our equipment safe. This dial, pressure dial gauge, is valuable, and we want to keep it as safe as possible. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. The other thing we have is our weight. And the Presto has this single weight because it is a dial, so it's simply this one weight, and that comes in its own little packaging too. Again, we'll talk about that shortly. And then we have more styrofoam. Now, this particular styrofoam you can choose to keep, no problem. Typically this one I'm not so concerned about keeping, even though I think I will keep it on this. I kind of wish I would have kept it for my other one, but I didn't. And I've not missed it, but I think it'd be nice to be able to put this away and just keep it packed properly, just like new after every use. Now, inside our canner, we have our base. So of course we have the bottom of the pan, obviously, right? But also what we have is we have a base. And with this base, we want to make sure to use this. We never pressure can or can without having a rack or a base down on the bottom. We don't want those jars to sit directly on the canner bottom. That's not good for the jars. Well, first of all, it's just not good. You don't want to do it. It's a big no-no. And then of course it comes with an amazing, and I think their booklet is really quite incredible. It is the Presto pressure canner and cooker. It comes with all the instructions. If you've not purchased one of these and you end up purchasing this, the first thing you're going to want to do before you use your canner is read this cover to cover. It's not that thick. I'm not talking about each of the recipes. The recipes you can use when you get there. But the actual instructions are important to go ahead and read. Even if you go ahead and you watch all of everybody's YouTube on pressure canning and pressure canners, always read the manual that comes with your specific one. Okay, just in case there's been any changes that we're not aware of. This one's a smidge different, just a smidge, than my original one, so that's something to keep in mind. All right, so now I've got this. I've got my instruction book. The very first thing that I'm going to do is, once I read this, oh, and by the way, the other thing that I like to do is I like to go online and check and see with all of these. Usually you can get a digital copy of this. I like to go ahead and download a digital copy and keep it on my tablet or on my phone or something like that. That way, if God forbid this gets lost or anything, I also have a digital version of this. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to grab a baggie. I'm going to grab some of this stuff right now. I actually brought all of this over to our filming studio. We're not over in the canning kitchen for this. I'm going to grab a quart-sized bag. And I'm using a freezer bag because they're thicker, they're better. And I am going to take this guy and I am going to put him right in my bag. Now, it looks like I need to fit him in sideways. No. Okay, so this book is a little bigger than my original. Oh, maybe not. Let's do this. Let's fold this. You know, these little guys you could throw away. It's just it's like the pillow tags that you're not supposed to rip off. Let's see if that changes things, because those were a little bigger than the actual manual. And yes, it did. Okay, there we go. So now, and I actually have one of the baggies that have a bottom that kind of gets wider. Why is this important? It's important because you're working with food, you're working in your kitchen, you're pulling this stuff out, you're going to have water on your counter, you're going to pull out your book like this, you're going to set it on the counter, it's going to get wet, it's going to get ruined. I find that if I keep this in this bag, it just protects it, and that to me is extremely important. Now I want to go through some of the parts. Let me get rid of this little plastic guy here. Okay, so we have our pressure gauge. With the Presto, this guy goes from 0 to 20. Now, I never want to go past 15 on my other one, just because I wouldn't take things that high pressure-wise. I believe this is a newer one. My other one actually only goes up to 15 because that tends to be the safe mark that we worry about. So our actual pressure dial has a screw, has a washer, and then it has a plastic washer, right? What I do, how this works, let me move this out of the way, grab my lid, set this down, I grab my lid, I flip it over, just like this. I take this guy, it only has the white washer, the plastic washer left on it. I put it right through, right there. I'm holding that with my bottom hand. I take this, by the way, I do this over a table, not over a hard floor, not over a cement floor, not over a floor that if I drop this, it's going to hurt anything. Do this part over a table whenever you're getting ready to can. I take my nut and I screw it. Now I screw it hand tight. You do not use a wrench and do that. You do it nice and snug and hand tight. Now, your little plastic guy is going to go tight against that outside hole, and now you have your dial gauge on there. Everything's fine. Here's another thing that I want to tell you. A lot of people, and I see this all the time on videos and sometimes in my own kitchen just because life is life, but sometimes we'll be doing stuff like this and people tend to grab the lids when they're getting ready and they like to set it on a table like this with that dial gauge on there. Again, This is golden. Now, yes, we can get a replacement for this, but I don't like to lay this down like this. This is a pretty heavy lid. I don't want the bolt part of this going through to bend or anything like that. So if I'm going to set it down, I'm either going to set it flat like this, or I'm going to have another little stock pot that I can set this upside down in, and it'll sit there, and yet this is not going to have any pressure on it to move it or do anything like that. So I have just attached this properly to my guy, so let me move this for a second. Let me move my chair. Do our green screen, if you would, Mr. Ritchie, and take me face on. So the other thing that I want you to know is this. So as we are looking at this, remember the venter? This is where we vent for a while. This guy always has to be clear. Now, always, every single time before I use this, once I put this little guy on, I take this and I look through just like this, and I want to see light through that hole. Now, if you can't see anything through there, then very simply, you can simply go right up to it, blow through, because it might be water, maybe you rinsed or something like that. Or if you still can't, then what I do is I grab a paper clip and I simply use a paper clip and I go right through there and I clear that hole. That is important. That clogged is not going to serve us in any way, shape, or form. The other thing is this. Let's go top down. I'm going to go a little bit against my own rule, kind of set that there. So this little guy, see this little right here? This screws on to this little popper-upper right here. This little popper-upper is a wonderful pressure gauge. And so with this, let me move my plastic stuff out of the way. It's annoying me. And the scissors, see, there's my OCD. Okay, so right here, you'll want to make sure that that's tight. This can unscrew and be loose, so I always want to make sure it's tight. This needs to be able to pop up just like that. You see how that comes up? Because when pressure starts building up, as we start timing our venting for our 10 minutes, this usually is going to come up. That's actually kind of my signal that it's close. And as long as I see some steam coming up out of here, and once you watch a few of the videos where people are doing pressure canning, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. But those are the important parts. This little guy right here, the little black guy right here, and we're a little more tech savvy than that. Let's go down here. This little guy right here. Right? That is the safety plug. And if, God forbid, too much pressure starts to build up in there, that's what's going to pop out, right? That's what's going to blow, is this little guy right here. Okay? So again, we have our vent dial, our valve right here, and then we have our safety plug. Okay, and of course, our handles. Now you'll also notice here that it says close, open. This little guy, now let's go back out. Okay, you see this handle on the pot? It has this arrow right here. What you're going to do is you're going to line it up with this little guy right there, and that's going to drop things down, and then to seal it, you're going to pull it closed, and that's going to seal. Now, next important part, there is a plastic seal on the inside of this lid, and this is it. It'll come right out. This is another little jewel in this crown. This is important. This is something you definitely want to make sure to maintain and take care of. Every time I use my pressure canner, At the end, not only does my pressure canner get washed out well, I use Dawn dishwashing liquid. That's what I use. That's what I like. Um, I also I'm going to go through that in a minute, but this guy right here, this gets washed and dried completely before it goes back on here, or actually usually I just put it back into my pot when I go to put it away, when it's not in use, and that way I know when I go to get it, that's been washed, because once in a while I have forgotten and I didn't catch it. So I found that for me, what works best is when I'm all done, this comes out, gets washed with the rest of the things that I would wash, the pot itself, and it's going to then go in the pot. That way I know, yep, that's been taken care of. Does this wear out over time? It definitely wears out. Now, I've had my original for years and years and years, and that's still in perfect shape. But I've heard, number one, that once in a while, maybe once a year, I don't know, I haven't done it. Some people like to put just a little bit of oil around the side. When I say oil, I'm talking about veg oil or olive oil or something like that. Now, I've never done that. I don't know. I'm just saying what I've heard over and over from some experienced canners that I do like, respect, and trust. Okay, now when you put that back in, it goes in and it's a nice seal. We want to make sure that it's a nice seal. And it is. It's not finicky. It only goes in one way. So that one is pretty straightforward and ready to go. Okay, so in general, there is the canner. Let me talk about a few things aside from what we've already covered that I do want to go over. Again, I've already shared with you that this little guy always goes in when you're canning. Now, for pints, you need two of these. Only one comes with the actual canner. So you can go online and you can order a second one. They have Presto, the actual Presto proper. I actually purchased two. It came in sets of two more. And they were not Presto, they were off brands, and they work just fine. That being said, I do really like this. This one seems to work the best. Not the other ones work bad, it's just I like the way it sets best. So if I were to do it all over again, I would purchase directly a Presto brand. Now, let's talk a little bit more. When I would be canning outside, if I'm using, because I'm using a gas stove inside when I'm usually canning in my canning kitchen. But if I were outside, canning in my outside canning kitchen, with using like propane or the, what's the canned gas, the butane, anything like that, the one thing that's going to happen is you're going to get a little bit of buildup on the bottom of the pan. I want to keep the bottom of my pan nice and clean. When you build up that dark on the bottom of your pan, you're actually not getting the full heat that you need to have to make sure that you're doing safe processing. So you always want to make sure, don't just clean the inside, also clean the outside and also clean the bottom of the pan. So for example, this is my ancient guy, my original. And you can see it's been used a lot, but it's still nice and clean. It is working wonderfully. I will be pulling that up in a minute to show you something else. Now, also for this guy, you've got your handles here on the top. You can see here we've got these little metal things. The handles have screw spots in them. On this one, it looks like I can use either a straight screwdriver or I can use a Phillips. These handles do not shift and move, right? So they are firm. Let me look on this top. On the top, so let me check. Yes. So on the top, the screw is not like this on the outside, it's actually on the inside. So if this guy starts to get loose or jiggle at all, you want to make sure, and this one takes a Phillips to do that. You want that like that. So the reason I bring that up is because I flaked out a bit over probably the last 6 months or a year, and I couldn't remember, and I don't know why. This was silly on my part. Do you see that? Do you see that? These handles have gotten a little bit loose. Now I'm handling something under pressure, and especially when I remove that top, that's not good. So what we want to do is check your handle. You know, whenever you use it, if you notice a loose handle, you're simply going to take a driver and you're going to re-tighten it. Do not strip it. Get it snug, but don't go so hard that you're going to strip something. And now that one is just a smidge loose. And I'll tell you what, I couldn't remember whether or not that's how it was new. So I never touched it. I'm like, well, maybe it came that way. Maybe that's a safety feature. No, that was over time, my handles got loose. And that's not the first time I've heard that, sadly enough. So that's another tip for our Presto pressure canner. The other thing that I want to share with you is this. The weight and the dial. You've seen how that goes on. At the end of pressure canning, this comes off. Where doesn't it go? It does not go immersed in water, right? So I take that off. I'm just going to set that there. My dial, I'm not going to immerse that in water with the lid when I go to clean my lid. This comes off. My metal washer, metal washer. Remember, there is a metal washer. If you don't have a metal washer on there, get one, because you've lost it and you need it. It's part of the safety feature, and that this baby functions properly and gives you the proper reading. So this guy can be recalibrated. I usually check my calibration every few years. They say to check it every year. I find that every few years works fine. There are videos up on YouTube or online if you want to go see how to check the calibration of your Presto 23 quart. Remember, always go for the one that you have, the exact one, 23 quart pressure canner, and there should be a number on the box. In fact, I should be telling you that. This is a 01781. Both of mine are. So that's the brand, so you want to type that in and find out how to recalibrate this every few years. I've never had to, and I've had mine for years now. But it does need to be checked, because God forbid it's off a little bit and you think you're canning at 11 pounds pressure, which is for my area what I'm usually doing it at, safe, and it's off and you're actually only at 10. You're not destroying your botulism spores and those sorts of things that we need to do as we're pressure canning. Is that something to be afraid of? No, you just check your calibration. It's fairly easy. I've done it once, but everything was fine, and that was about a year ago. Yeah, I did check it a year ago, that's right. But let's move on now. For storage, you saw my book goes in a bag. This, while I still have it, always goes in the safe bubble wrap. And as a matter of fact, I always have some bubble wrap around. I put that like that. And actually, I will rewrap my little guy. Put him in there. And if I ever lose this little envelope, I'll probably use some tape and create another one. So now I know this is safe. Where is it going? It's going in a freezer bag. Again, I want to keep this equipment safe. By the way, I just purchased this one. It was $100, I think, and 20 bucks. They're anywhere. Sometimes you can find them on sale for $100. up to 150 depending on where you bought it. This one happened to be about 120 bucks. Okay, so now I have this. If you want to, you can label it and be fancy. That's fine. Actually, you should. So I'm going to label this Presto PSI dial. Because that's what it is, PSI. Okay, so now that is safe. Now, what's our last part? Again, you have your weight in this little guy. And that's nice. I also, because it's heavy, we don't want it banging against something and damaging. So again, this is something that I also wrap up. Where does it go? Another quart size freezer bag. Again, for anybody in the future, if I'm no longer here, Presto weight. You know, last year I couldn't find my darn weight and I didn't realize it was up in the windowsill in my kitchen. It stayed there for the whole winter. I didn't even catch it until I couldn't find it. And then I happened to look up and like, oh, that was from last fall. All right, I now have a gallon baggie. Now that is all going in there. When I store this to put it back away, this is going back in the bottom. All of my tools are going back in there. Along with what? This guy. Now this is brand new. So before I use it, I will be washing. I'll pull that out. I will be washing the inside with Dawn. I will then be washing this with Dawn, letting it completely dry, washing my lid with Dawn, and then I will be ready to go to utilize it and put it on its maiden voyage. All right, so I'm going to close this up, and remember, this gets closed. When you do close it, line it, and close it. The other thing that I will mention is when you happen to be cooking, and I find my stove is directly in front of me, here's what I have found. And I should have done that when I had the dial on. I always have this part with the letters and this to my right, and then when I put this on and turn it, I also have my dial turned to kind of face diagonally this way, because then I can always read it. I can see my venter, my emergency guy is in the back, my little popper here that comes up and down based on the pressure, that I can see, but I want to make sure that I can always see my dial and read my dial. That, to me, for ergonomics and just positioning and making life easier, just seems to work. I know those little tips may not seem important, but they actually are. They're very important. All right, so I'm going to set this out of the way, and then we're going to come back and we're going to have a little chitty chat. Okay, so let's talk a little bit for my people who are brand new to pressure canning and you're nervous. And you want a little bit more information. So here are a few things that I want to talk about as well. Number one, pressure canning is the pressure, the PSI, that is always dependent upon where you happen to be located on the planet. You're going to be watching a lot of videos and you're going to notice a lot of people will say, I'm getting ready to can this, and this gets canned at, for me, at 11 pounds of pressure for such and such length of time. Now, the reason that they say for me is because it's not always the same pounds of pressure on the dial, for example, 11, dependent upon where you live. I am living 1,000 feet below 1,000 feet. Um, and that would be, I think, is that ocean level? 1,000 feet. What does that normally depend upon? Above sea level. Thank you. So above sea level, I am below 1,000 feet. And so therefore, I know that when I pressure can, most of the time, unless the recipe specifies something different, for safe canning, I am going to be processing my food at least 11 psi. I never want to go during that time that I am pressure canning below 11. If I do, I have to start my time all over again when I go back up to 11 or beyond. Now I have to tell you, I'm supposed to be 11. I prefer, and that's a dial. I'm talking about my Presto. That's a dial. Weighted canners are different. I don't use those. That's something that you might want to type into search and do a little bit of research on that. I think that would be the American, and there are a few other ones that are weighted. But let's stick with just the Presto one that we have been talking about. If you lived in the mountains and you were up a little higher, then your PSI requirement, it's not a suggestion, it's a requirement, needs to be possibly 13 to 15, right? Now remember when I said for me, let's stick to me and in my area. For me, it has to be at least 11. It can't go below 11 when I'm doing my processing time. I can have it higher. I like to have mine at about 12 or 13 pounds of pressure when I'm canning. That's about 2 pounds higher than what's suggested. I like that. I don't have to worry about it as I'm adjusting my heat occasionally during that processing time. I know that if it starts to go down, I have 2 pounds to be able to finagle and it won't go past my 11 pounds because I'm pretty OCD about it. I'm near my kitchen and I'm constantly checking at least every 5 or 6 minutes. And I also get to know the sound of my particular canner. So remember, I can go higher for me in my area than 11. You can go higher if your suggested area, and you can always check online. Um, Pressure canning PSI for my altitude, give your zip code, give your information. Also, in all of the manuals, aside from going online, you can also check there. It's usually in the manual that comes with your pressure canner. Um, it might give an altitude, and then you have to check the altitude in your area. So with that, like I said, I can go higher, but I can't go lower. If yours is 13, then you could go, if you're 15, great. I know with the weighted canners, you get two choices. You get 10 pounds or 15 pounds. There is no in between because it's all based on the jiggle of the weight. This, you don't have to do that. That's why we have a dial. It's easy peasy. I don't have to think so much, and I know exactly what I'm getting. So those things are important to know if you're new. Let's talk a little bit about why pressure canning as opposed to water bath canning. Water bath canning is a safe way to do some things, typically more acidic type foods, I think tomatoes and that sort of thing. Now, I'm pretty much pressure canning everything now. I typically don't do any water bath canning. What wouldn't we water bath can? Any meat, period. Meat never goes in a water bath canner, not ever, not ever. I don't care who. I don't care who wants to be rebellious and about the canning and all that. We don't play those games. You're dealing with possibly poisoning people, yourselves, your family, all of those things. We want to follow safe practices. And you don't have to be afraid if you follow the instructions. It's not a scary thing. This isn't a, boy, if you're just a little off, you can really cause a mess. No, it's called follow instructions and you're fine. And of course, the best instructions to follow, just a second here, excuse my reach, is here. So let me make a few suggestions. If you just invested in a pressure canner, Mine was a gift. My first one was a gift from my dear friend Roberta, and she got me my first one. So I was pressure canning before I was really knowing what I was doing, but I was following the recipes to the letter. So I was still doing safe processing. So the one thing that I think every canner or potential food preserver who wants to do pressure canning or anything of any type of preservation should get and invest in is this particular book. Now we have a green screen behind us, so it looks like this. I know my editor is going to, Rich will put a picture of the actual book. It is the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, their complete guide to home canning. And this is the 2020 printing. They always do a double check every 5 or 10 years because there are different rules. But I'll tell you what, there are a lot of great books out there. When the USDA tests it, it's tested in labs. It's tested safe. The recipes in this book, the guidelines in this book will keep you and the people you are feeding safe. This is something you don't compromise on. You definitely, and when you get this, you read it cover to cover. And I still every few years give it a good read. You know, I like it. Now, there are a lot of wonderful books out there. One of my other favorite books happens to be the Ball Blue Recipe book. And anything that Ball writes, I really enjoy. Now, the one thing that I will say is this: they are tested recipes, but they are not USDA approved. They have not been through that rigorous testing, but they are proven safe, right? So I have no problem using the Ball Blue Book, the legit ones from Ball. No problem using those. But also, I'm also very cautious of when they were written. If they were written anything more than 15 years ago, then I always look for an updated versions because we're always learning things, right? We are learning. There was a time when we had to learn you can't use flour, right? We can't use cream product when we are preserving food. We should be peeling any root vegetables. You should not use carrots, onions, potatoes in your food that you are canning without peeling and then washing again. You wash, peel, rinse, or wash again. Why? Because when things are in dirt, that's where botulism spores live, and we want to make sure that, I didn't know that at first, and I've been very lucky. I used to slice my carrots up, and simply go ahead and toss them into my product without, of course, they were washed and scrubbed, but they were not peeled. And I did learn that we really should be peeling any type of root vegetables to keep it perfectly safe. So just a couple of tips there. So back to our canner. So let me give you a little breakdown. You understand now a little bit about the pressure and how to use that, and also make sure you check to see what's applicable for your area. What is the difference between water bath canning and pressure canning, and why is pressure canning safer than water bath canning? When you water bath can, you are immersing your product, i.e. usually tomato products, jellies, jams. I believe those are water bath type items. I don't make jellies and jams, so I'm not sure about that. Um, but they're immersed in water and they're brought up to a specific temperature for high acid food that is safe, right? So you're able to deal with that. When you're dealing with things like meat or soups or stocks or any of those, even vegetable stock, what I know is that the temperature that the food needs to get to in order to be considered safe and free from botulism spores or any type of other bacteria spores is 240 degrees. Now, boiling water, most places on the planet, you can't get up to 240 degrees, right? I believe I can't tell you the exact number, but I will say this I know. The boiling point of water is less than 240. So the reason we pressure can is because we don't want the food product jars in the pressure canner to just reach boiling, and we don't want that much water in there. For our pressure canner, under almost every circumstance that I've done it, in the pressure canner I just showed you, I put I have my platform down below. I put 3 full quarts of water in there. It should never go up any higher. People say 2 to 3 inches of water in your pressure canner, and that is there for a reason. 3 quarts for me always seems to be perfect. That's whether I'm doing pints or whether I'm doing quarts. Um, and the reason that is because what a pressure canner does, kind of the quasi science behind it, is when you when you bring a pressure canner to boil and it's venting, it's getting rid of all of the air inside of the canner. You have that 3 inches of water, I'm sorry, 3 quarts of water in there. And then what happens is the air is replaced by steam. And the steam will raise the temperature of the food product in the jars, as well as everything in the canner up to 240, which is the safe zone based on USDA to get rid of and kill any botulism spores or anything like that, which is why we can then utilize that to can meat and other of the products that we normally would be nervous about canning. And we don't have to fear it as long as we follow the procedures and the times involved. Now, typically for me, I tend to can most of my meat products when I'm doing like the beef stroganoff, the bourbon chicken, or I'm just simply canning chicken alone or beef alone or something to use for my homemade dog food or anything like that. I'm typically doing those in pint jars, not in quart jars. There are things that I can use quarts for as far as meat. When I'm making some of the turkey soups that the meat has already been cooked or the chicken has been cooked or anything like that, and I'm not using full, I'm not packing that full, I'm willing to use quarts. But typically for me, when I'm doing meat stuff, I'm doing them in pint jars. Okay, so these are just some things to think about for those of you that are feeling a little bit anxious about it. You know, I've already said there are things we don't do. We don't use unpeeled root vegetables. We don't use flour. We don't use thickener. We don't do any of that. We always add those things when you go to prepare the food from the jar that's already been processed and canned. And that stuff you can learn through the recipes that are on our site, are on my site, but also there are a lot of amazing, amazing people out there on YouTube with some good information. And there are also a lot of people who are giving bad information. We want to remember that when we're doing pressure canning. Always, that's why I said always read your USDA. You can shift recipes a little bit, there's a little leeway, but your book is going to tell you in what areas. For example, spices and herbs, though dried only. I don't use, I might put some real parsley as part of a veg in a recipe and cook it um, to be canned. But when I'm adding spices, usually, for example, if I'm using thyme or rosemary or any of that, I'm going to be using dried. Those are a little bit more safe, and I can adjust those. Same with garlic, same with salt. I don't use a lot of salt in my canning just because I like to add it later. It keeps it safer. So aside from the unboxing, these are just some of the things for my new food processor people out there and preservationists to kind of keep in mind. Get the book, amazing, read it cover to cover. Find a canner that you like. Again, there are a lot of wonderful choices. I can certainly speak for the Presto 23 quart. That's the one I have. I absolutely love them. As I add more in the future, I'll review it. We'll talk about it. Okay, let me think. Is there anything else that I feel that I need to share? I always try to add tips throughout the other videos. So if I think of anything, I'll probably be adding them through the other food series that we're doing. Um, I did say make sure I use Dawn to wash them. I don't use any other types of detergents or anything. Told you about the paper clip. So there we go. There is the Presto canner, and I hope that helps a little bit if you're considering going into food preservation at this time in our human history. I think it's a smart thing to do. I think being prepared to handle things that could come down the pike, whatever form they take, is a very, very good thing. I'm certainly not a paranoid person or anything, but I do know that having food and stuff available is important. That is the one gift that I think the COVID crisis brought is, oh, there are things we should kind of always be a little bit prepared for our families to keep them safe. So there we have it. I hope you've enjoyed. As always, if you could please hit the subscribe if you're not subscribed. Our channel has a lot of different things. We have our food preservation series. We also have our arts and crafts. We have a lot of different things on this channel. So I hope you join me. But you can also pick and choose what you like. I will have playlists with all of the different sections so you're not watching all of things that you're not interested in. So as always, know you're loved. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other, and we will see you all down the road. Goodbye, everybody.